I was born in 1982, and the reason why I mention that and start there is because my mom, biologically, she was schizophrenic. She took drugs, and she birthed me in a toilet, the porcelain king, if you will. And she didn't know that she had done that, and a couple, like up to an hour and a half later, they found me in the toilet, and I was hypothermic and catatonic. I was probably not going to live. I was most likely going to die. And so they wrapped me up according to what I understand of the EMT report, and they brought me to the hospital. They did their tests, and they did the best that they could. Given that my mom was not capable of raising me or taking care of me, I was immediately placed into the foster system. My name is Edwin Depner. Hear my story. So the first foster care home I was in was traumatic. My situation happened out to be the lady that was the caregiver, her husband had passed away. And so this woman was going through a great form of depression. And the only other person in the home there was a younger girl who had Down syndrome. And so she would drag me around the house, not knowing how to take care of a baby in any way, form, or fashion. Probably gave me some trauma or some head injuries. There's high probability of that. After that part, given some space in, I think they pulled me out of that foster home, and then they started putting me up for adoption. I had no way out, but through some happenstance, through some grace or what have you, I was adopted by two parents that wanted a child that might not be able to walk, might not be able to talk. So adopted at 18 months to Stan and Nancy. I was pretty neglected as a baby. So I wasn't held, I wasn't looked after well, I was malnutrition. I had a lot of issues with even sitting up or crying. Nancy and Stan took me in, and I'll just I'll refer to them now as my mom and dad. And they really did their best with what they had and what they knew how to do to raise a child, probably beyond their understanding in that sense. So the doctors pretty much claimed, like, look, man, reading, writing, talking, having a normal life is going to be not possible for this child. So when you adopt this individual, you're on a lifelong child. It won't probably leave your house. And so now I'm growing up in this family, and I'm starting to notice, I get into, like kindergarten, preschool. I didn't really go through first or second grade. I jumped into a locked shift in education, and I started to notice that I really struggled a lot with just motor function. My mom and dad did a really good job. Once they noticed that I had some capability, I started to move around a little bit. They put me in physical therapy. They were putting me in that like 2-3 times a week. I remember doing weird things on balance boards and like tossing beanbags in the air and trying to say the alphabet backwards and all kinds of stimulating processes to get my brain to kind of get reactivated. And it was really hard because when I was in classes, or if I was starting anything on that area of elementary school, I was always massively delayed. I can remember being in like the classroom. I remember being a student, and just I was always the last kid at the desk. I was always that one that was like, I don't quite understand this. I'm not quite sure how to do this. And whether it was writing, reading, spelling, or understanding abstract concepts, it was really tough. But at the same time, I really had this strong, innate desire in me to keep going, to keep trying to not give up. I wanted to give up, and I have a lot of like low moments, but I continued to push through. I would say by some of my own strength at times, but beyond that, it went in further and deeper, and I couldn't really always explain that when I was younger. So I got pulled out of class, and I would take these long tests. Some of them, like the Woodcock-Johnson was one of them, and they would do these cognitive tests. And so anyway, these tests pretty much came out and gave me this diagnosis of ADHD and dyslexia. And a lot of this came from teachers that were just like, this kid is not able to sit still. He is loud and obnoxious. What can we do? And through the high school era, looked a lot like they had running start programs, and they put me through a culinary program. And that's when I really started to notice that I had the ability and I was capable, but the focus of getting myself in the zone of being able to sit down and focus and read started to become the issue. But if it was something I enjoyed, like photography or certain readings, if I understood what I was reading, I could excel at it. I could sit still. So they kind of put me through a couple of these field trip pieces, and I found that culinary was a good spot. I enjoyed the high pace energy in a kitchen. I enjoyed the art of it. And that's when I started to pick up a lot of skill and talent to do things like running, like field and track. Not very many sports because, again, I couldn't get into sports because I had to keep some kind of grade average up, but most of the time I was failing. So I put myself through culinary school in what they called Running Start through a snow program. And I started working through that, and I graduated high school technically without really ever taking an English class. The next following year, I saved up enough money. I, applied for FAFSA, and I got into the school. The first year I went to this college, my friends were with me. It was really a really trying and hard season. So I took the school load of four classes, a full-time load. And the school has a lot of backgrounds in like Jesuits, Greek, Hebrew. It was not an easy school. Given the fact that I had mentioned that I'd never taken an English class in high school, I pretty much landed high Fs. I mean, they were high Fs, but I landed high Fs all the way through. Failed, like front nose fail. Dived it into the mountain, and I was like, yeah, I'm not supposed to be here. This is nuts, man. No way. One individual at that school came to me and said, "No, I really think you're supposed to be here, to the point where I cut you a check for your classes. Try again." Like, that to me was, I wasn't sure if that guy was a fool or I was really supposed to be there. I was like, this guy doesn't know what to do with his money. So I went back for the following year, and I got better. And through that season of college, I graduated with a really low GPA, but I graduated with a lot of hurdles and bumps and extreme frustrations, but it worked. It worked out. It happened. I landed in New York City, and I got accepted to a graduate school program for mental health counseling. My grade average is straight A's at this point. And I never thought I would say that. I never thought I would be in that position. And I never thought that for an instance I would be telling my story in a place where I could say that I succeeded in something I always desired to, always wanted it. And here I am. So if you're going through a place of identity, despair, a place of intellectual brokenness, if you're in a place where maybe things don't add up the way that you'd like them to, and you've maybe been diagnosed with dyslexia, ADHD, or cognitive disorder, or written dysfunction, There are a lot of people like me out there that learn how to use their strengths to break through from their weaknesses. There's hope for you. There is a way out.